Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu news analysis. So today we have some very important news articles, and one by one we'll try to discuss all these articles in a very detailed manner. And the first article with which we are going to start this discussion is about an inhuman and barbarian terrorist attack that took place in Jammu and Kashmir, and that claimed the lives of around 26 to 27 tourists or civilians. No doubt that this terrorist attack has been sponsored by Pakistan, and this is the result of cross-border terrorism that has been emanating from Pakistan that has claimed the lives of 27 tourists. And in fact, this is not the first time that Pakistan-based or Pakistan-sponsored terrorist organizations or terrorist groups conducting such barbarian terrorist attacks on India. So before also, there are number of terrorist attacks that are conducted by the Pakistani-based cross-border terrorist organizations. So this is a very unfortunate incident that took place. And we'll try to understand the context of this article. So the incident context is that this terror attack took place in Pahalgam. So Pahalgam is very close to Anantnag in Jammu and Kashmir. So it is being said that around 26 to 27 people or civilians lost their lives. And most of the people who have lost their lives because of the terrorist attack are tourists. So therefore, from 2019 till now, this Pahalgam terrorist attack is considered as the deadliest terrorist attack that happened in India. So the scale and severity of the terrorist attack that happened in Pahalgam is huge. And in fact, the other thing that we should remember here, that this terrorist strike that took place in Pahalgam has actually coincided with Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Saudi Arabia and even US Vice President J.D. Vance's trip to India. So therefore, it actually signaling a calculated geopolitical messaging from the terrorist organizations that would like to send to the global community. And this is not the first time that such an attack happened when high-level dignitaries have been visiting India. In the past also, several such incidents have happened. And first of all, we'll try to understand what exactly happened. So you can see on this image how a newly married woman just sitting beside her husband's dead body. Right? So this is one of the picture of this barbarian and inhuman terrorist attack that took place. And in fact, so this is known as Baisaran Meadow, right? So the terrorist attack that took place is the place called Baisaran Meadow, and it is also known as the India's Switzerland. So this is Baisaran Meadow, and it is a very beautiful place, and it is also one of the top tourist destination in Jammu and Kashmir. And in this place, around 40 or more tourists have been enjoying the location, and terrorists suddenly ambushed these tourists. Right? So in fact, they started firing at the tourists in the name of religion. And in fact, the victims of this particular act of terrorism are being identified by name before being executed. Before being opened fire by these terrorists, they started searching ID cards, and they even asked their names as well. And in fact, after this terrorist attack has happened, terrorist groups like the Resistance Front, TRF, so that is believed to be an affiliate of Lashkar-e-Toiba. So this is believed to be an affiliate of Lashkar-e-Toiba that has conducted multiple terrorist attacks in India, including the Mumbai terror attacks. So it has claimed the responsibility, and the reason that it has given is the demographic changes that have been taking place in the Jammu and Kashmir. And previously also such terrorist attacks took place on India when such high level dignitaries have been visiting India so that they can get the global recognition. So in 2000, Chitti Singh Pora massacre. So around 36 killed during the Clinton's India visit. So US President Bill Clinton's visit, during that visit in 2000, so this massacre had took place. In 2002 also Kalachak attack. So in this Kalachak attack 2002, 23 civilians including 10 children killed during US diplomats visit to Jammu and Kashmir. So therefore this is another such incident that happened when high level US dignitary visiting India. So these patterns have actually highlighted or underlined the terrorists' intent to attract the global attention. So they would like to attract the global attention that the Jammu and Kashmir issue has not been solved even after India abrogating Article 370. So they particularly targeting tourists, civilians is surprising because it is being said that they never targeted tourists before. But this time they targeted tourists. And this terrorist attack also come in the backdrop of Pakistan's army chief making some remarks on Hindus, some remarks on India, particularly in the backdrop of this two-nation theory that has led to the emergence of Pakistan as a separate nation. Now, in this context, we will understand what are the consequences of this attack on India's security and the regional stability. So it is very important to understand the consequences of such an attack that took place on India. So it is being believed that India already abrogated Article 370 of the Constitution. Article 370, we all knew that it has provided special status to Jammu and Kashmir. So because of this special status, it is being believed that the governments, the successive governments before the existence of Article 370 failed to provide good governance, failed to improve infrastructure, failed to provide a decent living standards for the people of Jammu and Kashmir, and it has also resulted in instability in Jammu and Kashmir, poor security situation as well. So though showing these as a reasons, the central government has abridged Article 370. So that has provided special status to Jammu and Kashmir. And in fact, Center also believed that after abrogation of Article 370, the security situation in Jammu and Kashmir would improve. However, this terrorist attack in Pahalgam has undermined the perceived peace post Article 370 abrogation. So it is generally believed that after abrogation of Article 370, we could bring in peace in Jammu and Kashmir. So therefore, overall, it has resulted in casting a doubt on the success of the developmental narratives that the center has been following. One. So secondly, tourism is one of the mainstay of Jammu and Kashmir. So Jammu and Kashmir is excessively dependent on tourism. So it is being believed that every year Jammu and Kashmir has been earning a revenue of 7,500 crore from tourism itself. So it will impact a number of tourists coming to Jammu and Kashmir because this terrorist attack in Pahalgam primarily targeted tourists. So therefore, a tourism is generally considered as a main activity in Jammu and Kashmir. So therefore, this will suffer a sharp dip in overall tourist footfall, and that will certainly hurt the livelihoods of the local people. Because during the summers itself, Jammu and Kashmir experiences peak tourism. But because of this terrorist attack that happened in Jammu and Kashmir, so it would certainly affect the tourist footfall. And that would ultimately impact the livelihoods of the people as well, pushing back the people of Jammu and Kashmir into the poverty. However, it also having this terrorist attack will also have the repercussions, because the attack actually projects the instability that has been existing, and it could even result in diplomatic fallout that we have already been looking into, or we have already been observing that, because the central government in a series of decisions has decided to close down the Wagah border, and the center has also decided to temporarily suspend the Indus Water Treaty between India and Pakistan that was signed in 1960s. And apart from that, the center has also decided to expel the Pakistani diplomat from India. So a series of decisions have been taken, and it is considered as a diplomatic fallout. So therefore, it can actually give a leverage to adversarial narratives from Pakistan. And apart from that, this terrorist attack might have the communal tensions. So what exactly are these communal tensions? Communal tensions are the tensions which have their roots in religion or the religious intolerance. And India is a country which is known for its huge diversity, because people from different religions are living peacefully in India. So, however, the selective targeting of tourists by these terrorist elements in this terrorist attack, so this may spark religious polarization, and terrorists aim to provoke. So therefore, these are the certain concerns that we have because of this terrorist attack. So what should be the way forward in this context, right? So there should be some swift intelligence based operations. These, because Pahalgam terrorist attack is primarily considered as the failure of the intelligence. So if we have adequate intelligence, we could have we could have warned the tourists, and we could have given this information to the security forces on the ground, whether it is Jammu and Kashmir police and the Indian army, so that such attacks would not take place. So therefore, there is a need for a swift intelligence based operations. So these operations would neutralize the perpetrators using actionable intelligence. And apart from that, the coordination between the security forces on the ground is also very, very important. So we have a CRPF, Indian Army, and Jammu and Kashmir police as well. So the coordination is very important. So regularly they need to share the intelligence that they have. And these coordinated operations are very important to eliminate these terrorist elements. And apart from that, strategic communication is very, very important among the forces on the ground in Jammu and Kashmir. And the strategic communication between the center and the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir is also very, very important. So this actually plays a very, very important role in preventing any communal rhetoric which is spread among the people that could have the communal tensions, and that could even result in the communal polarization as well. Now, in this context, the government must reassure public and promote unity to deny terrorists their intended outcome. So what is the outcome of the terrorists? So the outcome of the terrorists is that the development should not take place in Jammu and Kashmir, because tourism is one of the mainstay of Jammu and Kashmir. If tourists don't come, people of Jammu and Kashmir would not have adequate livelihood opportunities. They might not have adequate employment opportunities, adequate economic opportunities. They still pushed back into the poverty. So therefore, that would result in potential instability, and terrorists wanted this instability in Jammu and Kashmir. So therefore, this instability has to be prevented in Jammu and Kashmir at any cost. And there is a need to revive tourism and tourism confidence in Jammu and Kashmir. So if such kind of a terrorist attacks are taking place against the tourists, then of course it is certain that tourists would not prefer to go to Jammu and Kashmir. So therefore, tourism confidence, increasing tourism confidence is also very, very important, right? So enhancing surveillance in sensitive zones. There are certain zones which are considered as sensitive zones, and there is a need to deploy technology driven solutions such as unmanned aerial vehicles, facial recognition technologies, terrain mapping in high altitude non motorable zones, so that we could identify those elements who have been planning such attacks, and we could also take a swift action against them. And in fact, the diplomatic measures are also very important. There are organizations like UN, G20, and even bilateral forums as well. So Pakistan has been time and again and continuously supporting this cross-border terrorism, and there is a need to expose Pakistan's support to the cross-border terrorism in these multilateral and bilateral forums. India in the past diplomatically isolated Pakistan, and Pakistan was also in the grey list of Financial Action Task Force previously. So therefore, there is a need for a sustained diplomatic action against Pakistan to diplomatically isolate it and expose and name and shame Pakistan in these international organizations. And these measures are very important. So as of now, the government has taken some swift action with respect to a temporary suspension to Indus Water Treaty and even suspension of the Wagah border. So these measures have been taken. So in retaliation, Pakistan has also suspended the Shimla agreement that was signed between India and Pakistan. So this Shimla agreement is talking about bilaterally settling the disputes between India and Pakistan, particularly the Jammu and Kashmir issue respecting the line of control. So these are the issues that are part of the Shimla agreement, but Pakistan as a retaliation suspended this Shimla agreement. So whatsoever, there is a need for a sustained diplomatic and military action that is required from India to deter Pakistan adopting cross-border terrorism as a policy against India. So Pakistan adopts a policy called Bleed India by 1,000 Cuts. And Pakistan has been continuously supporting cross-border terrorism. On the other side of LOC, in Pakistan occupied Kashmir, there are a number of terrorist camps where these terrorists are openly trained and sent to the Indian side, crossing the line of control. And Pakistani army has been continuously supporting these terrorist organizations and the terrorist bases which are located in the Pakistan occupied Kashmir. So therefore, there is a need for an international action on these terrorist organizations, terrorist groups, or countries which are supporting these terrorist organizations. There is a need for a swift and stringent action. However, previously, India has introduced a comprehensive convention on international terrorism, and that was proposed by India in 1996. But this comprehensive convention on international terrorism is not yet adopted by the United Nations General Assembly. The reason is the differences among number of countries about the definition of terrorism. So this is the reason that they have not yet adopted this comprehensive convention on international terrorism that has been proposed by India. So there is a need for international cooperation, international solidarity, international measures, particularly aimed at curbing the terrorist activities and violence emanated from terrorism. And the next important topic, so this is also a very important topic. So this is about a recent decision to link Aadhaar cards with the voter IDs to bring in more transparency and also eliminate or weed out the fake voter IDs and also ensure a more legitimate, free and fair election process. Now understand, this is very important. This is important for your gender studies paper too. So we'll try to understand the context. The context is that the Election Commission of India has renewed its efforts to link the Aadhaar cards with the voter IDs. However, according to the legal experts, it has some constitutional concerns. So constitutional concerns with respect to a disenfranchisement of the voters, a data misuse, and also it questions the democratic integrity, right? So I hope every one of you have Aadhaar cards, and your Aadhaar cards are being linked with the voter IDs for a better election, and also eliminate the fake and duplicate voter IDs, because that could undermine the overall democratic process, that could undermine the principle of free and fair elections, which is part of the basic structure doctrine of the Indian Constitution. Now understand the constitutional and legal concerns that the legal experts have been highlighting that could emanate from linking Aadhaar card with the voter IDs. So in fact, this voluntariness has undermined as Form 6B. It has offers no real output. No real opt-out. So no real opt-out actually means that, for example, you are an voter and you have a voter ID and you also have the Aadhaar card. So it is mandatory for you to link your Aadhaar card with the voter ID, and you cannot individually voluntarily opt out from this. So it is mandatory that you should link your Aadhaar card with the voter ID. So therefore, the voluntariness, the principle of voluntariness has been undermined by this. And in fact, it can also amounts to coercing consent and also violating the individual autonomy as well, because it is mandatory for every individual to link their Aadhaar card with the voter ID, ultimately violating the individual autonomy. And in fact, this linkage also risks mass disenfranchisement as well. So mass disenfranchisement actually means that excluding the voters, right? Because it can actually infringe upon the fundamental right to privacy, and violating the fundamental right to privacy would resulting in violating the Puttaswamy judgment of 2018 and principles which were laid down previously in Lal Babu Hussain case 1995. And similarly, Section 9 of Aadhaar Act 2016 also confirms Aadhaar is not a proof of citizenship. So you have to understand that Aadhaar is not a proof of citizenship. So this is not a proof of citizenship, and in fact this statement has also been given in UPSC prelims examination, right? This is not the proof of citizenship. And in fact the UIDAI, right? So this is the organization which actually looks after the Aadhaar database, right? Unique Identification Authority of India. So Unique Identification Authority of India permits Aadhaar to non-citizens who are residing in India above 182 days, so thereby making it a constitutionally unfit for electoral authentication. So if you have lived more than 182 days in India, even if you are not a citizen of India, then you would be given the Aadhaar card. However, so if you have the Aadhaar card, you can link your Aadhaar card with the voter ID even if you get a fake voter ID. So therefore, it is considered as constitutionally unfit for the electoral authentication. However, there are certain operational and technological deficiencies as well, and they are existing in this case because the database is unreliable, because the Comptroller and Auditor General Audit Report number 24 in the year 2021 actually highlighted the cancellation of around 4.75 lakh Aadhaar numbers for duplication and biometric faults, so thereby ultimately undermining trust in the Aadhaar based deduplication. And apart from that, there is also a lack of appellate mechanism. So lack of appellate mechanism in the sense that, for example, if you are being excluded from the benefits of voting, then you cannot appeal. So therefore, there is a lack of appellate mechanism as well, because citizens who opt out they face in-person justifications without an accessible appeal process. However, this will disproportionately affecting the elderly, disabled, and the migrant individuals. And apart from that, the surveillance risks that are involved in this. So because the Digital Data Protection Act 2023 actually enabled a state surveillance. So this is also concerning. And Aadhaar seeding with voter IDs may allow the profiling and even electoral manipulation via the demographic targeting. So these are some concerns, some challenges which are existing with respect to linking Aadhaar card with the voter IDs, right? So you can also go through the Supreme Court's verdict on Aadhaar card. So Aadhaar card has to be linked with PAN card and income tax returns. So the Supreme Court has held this, and Aadhaar is still mandatory to avail welfare scheme benefits. Aadhaar is not mandatory for opening bank account, and even you don't have to provide Aadhaar for a mobile connection as well. And eKYC using Aadhaar is not mandatory for mobile wallets. So this is what the Supreme Court has actually held with respect to the nature of Aadhaar. So to what purposes Aadhaar card is mandatory, to what purposes Aadhaar card is actually not required, because previously Center has made it mandatory that for most of the schemes, most of the policy decisions, Aadhaar card is mandatory, right? So democratic and institutional implications of this decision. So we'll try to understand the democratic and institutional implications as well. So this might have results in erosion of universal suffrage. So universal suffrage actually means that irrespective of race, caste, sex, place of birth, so everyone who is above 18 years of age would be given the right to vote, right? So linking of Aadhaar with the voter IDs would actually imposes a discriminatory burdens, and it could even undermines the electoral inclusivity as well, and ultimately violating Article 326 of the Constitution. And in fact, Article 326 of the Constitution talks about the universal suffrage. And apart from that, linking Aadhaar with the voter IDs would also result in the loss of institutional independence, or it may result in threat to institutional independence, because the Unique Identification Authority of India, it is a statutory body and it is also under the executive control. However, it will be involved in electoral data management, and it can even dilute the constitutional independence of the Election Commission of India as well. However, there are certain alternative verification models also, and these alternative verification models are ignored, particularly the mechanisms like booth level officer verification, social audits, public grievance redressal. So they could be more effective, and they will also be constitutionally sound alternatives rather than just linking Aadhaar card with the voter IDs. And it is also said that not every individual would have the Aadhaar cards, and most of the individuals also in possession of fake Aadhaar cards, fake voter IDs as well. However, there are certain pros and cons of linking Aadhaar with the voter IDs. The benefits of linking Aadhaar card with the voter ID is that it could eliminate the duplicates or the fake voter IDs, and it could even improve the electoral accuracy. It could streamline the process of overall election, and it could even enhance the security, and it could even result in facilitating a greater reforms in the election process, and that will ultimately result in the free and fair elections, and that is considered as foundation in any democracy. And apart from that, there are certain privacy concerns, risk of exclusion, deletion, errors, misuse of officials, and even the coercion to link as well, right? So there are both pros and cons with respect to linking voter IDs with Aadhaar card. So however, linking Aadhaar with the voter IDs is a step that has to be followed, because it would eliminate the fake voter ID cards. It would result in greater transparency in the election process, and ultimately it would result in free and fair elections as well. And now, so we'll understand another very important article is about the Arctic region and what are India's stakes in the Arctic region. So because of climate change, what has been happening is that the glaciers in Arctic region are melting at a faster pace, and that has resulted in completely changing the ecosystem of the Arctic region. And there is a new sea route is also emerging, and melting of glaciers would also expose the mineral resources, and now those mineral resources in the Arctic region are also vulnerable, because the countries have been looking to exploit the mineral resources in Arctic region, and ultimately it could have a number of repercussions. Now in this context, we'll look into India's actual stakes in the Arctic region and how India could actually play a larger role in the Arctic region to protect the fragile ecosystem in the Arctic region. So remember that there is an Arctic Council for the protection of the environment in the Arctic. So however, India is not a full-term member of the Arctic Council. India is just an observer of the Arctic Council, right? So what is the context? So the context is that India is going to host Arctic Circle India Forum in the year 2025. Very soon India is going to host Arctic Circle India Forum. And however, this particular forum is said to deepen India's engagement in the Arctic geopolitics and even the climate discourse as well. However, this is considered as significant and also very, very important because the Arctic sea ice has been shrinking at a faster pace, because it is said that a 12.2% per decade the Arctic ice has been shrinking as per the NASA reports, and thereby it has been opening a new sea route called the Northern Sea Route, right? So this Northern Sea Route is considered as a new global trade corridor. However, this development also coincides with the warnings that the global temperatures have breached 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold in 2024, and in fact the Paris deal, which is under part of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, aimed to control global temperatures below 2 degrees Celsius, however if possible 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2100. However, by 2024 itself, the global climate the global temperatures have increased 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold, thereby ultimately underlining the region's urgency, the need to protect the fragile nature of the Arctic region, right? So we talked about northern sea route, right? So Northern Sea Route. So this is the Northern Sea Route that has been emerging because of the shrinking of glaciers in the Arctic region, right? So this Northern Sea Route has been emerging, and this Northern Sea Route would potentially link the Atlantic Sea with the Pacific Ocean. So Atlantic Ocean with the Pacific Ocean. And now this Northern Sea Route, earlier it is not that navigable because of the presence of the glaciers, presence of ice, so it was not navigable. But because of increasing temperatures, melting glaciers, the Northern Sea Route has been melting at a faster pace, and it has become a navigable trade route, right? So thereby it has been offering the shortest trade route between Europe and Asia, and thereby reducing both shipping cost as well as time. And in fact, the surge in cargo through the Northern Sea Route, so that has been increased from 41,000 tons in 2010 to 37.9 million tons in 2024. It is actually an enormous increase. Thereby it has been showing its growing strategic importance for the global trade as well. And similarly, India's maritime calculus, particularly India actually views this northern sea route through both economic and geopolitical lenses, thereby aligning its port development strategy with evolving trade reality as well. However, India is also having the scientific and diplomatic footprint, because India actually signed the Svalbard Treaty in 1920 and established a research station called Himadri Research Station in Arctic, so thereby making it the only developing country along with China with a permanent base in the Arctic region. And apart from that, the climate linkages, as Indian agencies have modeled how Arctic ice loss, because the glaciers and ice sheets in Arctic region are melting at a faster pace because of increasing temperatures, and how Arctic ice loss could actually impact the Indian monsoons, and how the Indian monsoons or Arctic sea ice loss would impact agricultural yield in India. So it has underlined the domestic climate vulnerabilities as well. So in the year 2022, India already launched its Arctic policy, right? So India's Arctic policy actually outlined 5 different pillars. These are the 5 different pillars of India's Arctic policy, and they actually outlined a clearer timelines and institutional mechanisms to transition from policy to execution, right? So these 5 pillars of Arctic policy including, so enhancing India's cooperation with Arctic region, and harmonizing the polar research with a third pole, and to contribute to efforts to enhance humankind's understanding of the Arctic region, strengthening international efforts combating climate change, protection of the environment, and to advance the study and understanding of the Arctic within India as well. So these are 5 pillars of India's Arctic policy 2022. However, there are certain geopolitical and diplomatic dimensions also, so which are existing here. So when we talk about the diplomatic and geopolitical dimensions, so India and Russia actually formed a working group on the northern sea route, right? So this northern sea route has been emerging, and Russia is a major country which has been bordering the majority of the Arctic region. So you can see, so Russia has been bordering the majority of the Arctic region. So both India and Russia have formed a working group on this northern sea route and the Chennai-Vladivostok corridor, right? So this particular maritime corridor connects Chennai with Vladivostok, so that could particularly enhance India's Arctic access. China and polar Silk Road points India's Arctic role must be cautious, because China has actually launched the polar Silk Road as well, and therefore it points towards India's Arctic role. India's role must be very, very cautious in the Arctic region, as aligning too closely with Russia may support China's the polar Silk Road, and that is not in the best interest of India as well. And by hosting the forum, India can actually advocate a greater global south participation, and also the reforms which are necessary for protecting the fragile nature of the Arctic region as well. So these are the countries which actually share their borders with the Arctic region: Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Russia, USA, Canada, and Denmark. So these are the countries with which they share their borders with the Arctic region. So this Arctic Council was established through Ottawa Declaration 1991. So its secretariat is located in Norway, and India has an observer status in the Arctic Council. And the next important article, there is an important article, so that has been given in the Hindu newspaper. So it is talking about the judicial despotism. So what does this judicial despotism actually means, and why it is in news? Because we have been continuously discussing this and tracking this, that the Supreme Court has recently delivered a judgment on the powers of the governor and the president to withhold assent to the bills passed by the state legislative assembly. The Supreme Court has also used Article 142 of the Indian Constitution. And what does Article 142 of the Indian Constitution says? That so the power of the Supreme Court to do complete justice in any matter which is pending before the Supreme Court. So Supreme Court used Article 142 of the Constitution, and it has directed the timelines for both governor and the president to give assent to the bills passed by the state legislative assembly. And after Supreme Court has given this direction, there is a pushback from both legislature and the executive, and it is being said that the Supreme Court has been encroaching upon the constitutionally guaranteed powers of legislature and the executive, right? So because Vice President Jagdeep Dhankar said that it is a missile strike on the executive and the legislature. The judgment of the Supreme Court is actually a nuclear missile strike on both legislature and the executive. And in fact, a number of legal luminaries have also criticized the recent judgment of the Supreme Court, setting timelines for governor and the president. And in fact, a constitution is silent on that. Constitution has not mandated any proper timelines for governor and the president to give assent to the bills passed by them. So therefore, a series of judgments in recent times had several parties questioning the powers and motives of the Supreme Court. And in fact, the Supreme Court of India is being viewed as the guardian of the constitutional morality, guardian of individual rights, civil liberties, and it has lately found itself at the center of national debate as well. So there are concerns with respect to recent judicial decisions which have been reflecting the era of judicial despotism and simply the judiciary fulfilling its role amidst increasing socio-political conditions that have been existing. However, the Indian Constitution does not explicitly mention the term judicial review anywhere, right? So even though we very often use the term judicial review, but Indian Constitution has nowhere mentioned the term judicial review, but its spirit has been embedded in Article 13 of the Indian Constitution. Remember, in prelims examination, Article 13 is also very often asked, and it also empowers the constitutional courts to invalidate the laws which are contradictory to the fundamental rights, which are in violation to the fundamental rights. However, Article 32 and Article 226 of the Indian Constitution, they also further cement the judiciary's a huge role in safeguarding the rights of the individuals, reinforcing the judicial review as an essential component of the basic structure of the Indian Constitution. So what does the judicial review actually says? That if any legislative, executive or administrative decision has been taken and this decision is contradictory to the constitutional provisions, then the Supreme Court would declare those policy decisions as unconstitutional using its power of the judicial review, right? So Article 142, we have already discussed about this. So Article 142 says that the power of the Supreme Court to do complete justice in any matter, and the greater debate is around the Article 142 of the Indian Constitution, right? So in fact, previously also the Supreme Court has used Article 142 to deliver important judgments in Babri Masjid case, mob lynching guidelines, and even the marriage breakdowns as well. So critics even argue that this provisions allows excessive discretion, while defenders see it as a necessary instrument for justice in exceptional circumstances, right? So we have already understood Article 142 of the Indian Constitution that talks about the power of the Supreme Court to do complete justice in any matter. So what is the judicial despotism? So we need to talk about this judicial despotism as well, right? Because this article mainly discussing about the judicial despotism. So judicial despotism actually refers to a scenario where the unelected judges, so they actually exercise the excessive powers and thereby overriding the legislative as well as the executive authority. And in fact, it arises when courts act beyond the interpretation, venturing into policy making or the governance roles, right? So judiciary has a specific role to perform. However, in recent times, what has been happening is that judiciary has been encroaching upon the powers and functions and responsibilities of legislature and executive, and that is particularly concerning. And this also resembles the excessive exercise of the power by the Supreme Court, right? So what are the features of the judicial despotism that we should understand here, right? So the features of judicial despotism are the frequent invocation of Article 142 of the Indian Constitution, right? So this specifically talks about the power to ensure complete justice, and that can be used to bypass statutory procedures. So in fact, in Babri Masjid case, this provision has been used, and expanding the public interest litigation jurisdiction, because courts entertain petitions even without the personal grievance affecting the separation of powers, and weakening of democratic accountability, because judges face no electoral scrutiny unlike the elected lawmakers, right? So through a number of cases, so the provision of the public interest litigation has been emerged, so you can go through with that. And what are the causes of judicial despotism? So we'll try to understand this as well. So if we look into the causes of judicial despotism, so in 1975, India had actually experienced the emergency, but after emergency, courts started expanding its powers through doctrines like public interest litigation, and public interest litigation actually played a very important role in restoring the legitimacy of the judiciary. And in fact, the legislative and executive inaction led to courts stepping in when other organs failed to act or delaying the decisions, right? So delays by the governors in bill assent. So ambiguity in constitutional provisions, because the vague language that has been used, like Article 142, Article 370, so that actually gives a wider discretion to the courts as well. And public pressure and media spotlight in recent times, so a public pressure on the judiciary, and public is also expecting a lot from the judiciary. So because of all these reasons, also judicial despotism, judicial overreach, judicial activism have been increasing a lot. And similarly, there are lack of checks and balances, because absence of formal accountability for judges creates a space for unchecked authority. However, what will be the consequences of judicial despotism? So we should also understand the consequences of judicial despotism. So erosion of democratic principles, because overstepping courts will risk replacing the legislative processes with the personal interpretation. So it will ultimately result in the erosion of the democratic principles. And even there is a perception of bias or activism, and that could weaken trust in the judicial neutrality, right? Because Constitution has actually guaranteed different functions, powers for different branches of the government, but here judiciary very often encroaching upon the powers and functions of the other branches of the government. And even it would result in stalemate in the governance process, because judicial overreach may delay or reverse the policy decisions. Example, the 99th Constitutional Amendment Act, so that has been brought in National Judicial Appointments Commission, but the Supreme Court has declared that this National Judicial Appointments Commission is unconstitutional. It violates the independence of the judiciary. And the threat to federalism, because judiciary can indirectly undermine the state autonomy. So for example, refusal to restore full statehood to Jammu and Kashmir. So misuse of contempt powers, because silencing fair criticism under contempt of court may breed the judicial intolerance as well. So these will be the consequences of judicial despotism. So apart from this, what are the measures that have to be taken? For example, judicial restraint is very, very important, right? So judicial restraint is very, very important. Respecting separation of powers, separation of checks and balances are important, but separation of powers should also be very, very important, and the Supreme Court or the judiciary must respect the ideal of separation of powers as well. right? So the difference between judicial activism and judicial overreach has been given here. So judicial activism is actually welcomed because it fills the existing legislative or executive vacuum, but judicial overreach is very often criticized because it actively encroaches upon the it actively encroaches upon the powers of the executive and legislative organs of the government, right? So examples have also been given. Judicial activism, so invented mechanisms which have no constitutional backing, for example suo motu and public interest litigations. So such things have been introduced through judicial activism. Judicial overreach, so for example Vishaka guidelines are also part of the judicial activism by the Supreme Court. However, judicial overreach, higher judiciary deciding on the Diwali firecrackers and banning liquor on the highways within the 500 meters on highways. So all these things will be part of the judicial overreach, right? So I hope you have understood this. If you have any doubt, so you can post those doubts in the comment section. And that's all in this lecture. Thank you.